I never thought the first person to try and kill me would be my own son. The glass of orange juice was already in my hand when Samuel, the restaurant's security guard, gripped my shoulder and whispered, "Mrs. Dawson, I just saw your son pour something into your drink." My heart stopped. The room was still filled with clinking glasses and laughter, but all I could hear was that one sentence. My son, my flesh and blood, the boy I once sang to sleep, had just been caught trying to poison me in front of everyone. If a betrayal like this makes your heart race, hit subscribe to Twist Stories, because here, truth always strikes back. And tell me in the comments, has your family ever hidden something that changed everything? My name is Jacqueline Dawson, though most call me Jackie. I'm 68, a widow, and the mother of a son I once thought I could trust. For decades, I built a family, stood beside my husband Robert, a gifted artist whose paintings still hang in galleries across the country. He left me love, memories, and a fortune meant to preserve his legacy. But for Matthew and his wife Lauren, money was never a legacy. It was oxygen. And when it ran out, they suffocated. That night, at the dinner supposedly honoring Robert's art, the truth struck me like a knife. Lauren had arranged everything. Her voice too loud, her laughter too sharp, the corner table that made me feel like a guest instead of the widow being celebrated. Then Matthew humiliated me in front of patrons, joking I almost burned the kitchen down as Lauren's laugh sliced through the room. I forced a smile, but inside, my heart sank. My son, the boy I sacrificed for, was turning me into a frail punchline. And then came the glass. Samuel, the head of security, leaned down and whispered, "Mrs. Dawson, I saw your son pour something into your juice." The world went silent. Forks clinked, people laughed, but I heard nothing except those words. I raised the glass slowly, locking eyes with Matthew. He smiled, that same crooked smile from childhood, once mischievous, now malicious. My hand trembled, but I didn't drink. Instead, I pressed a hand to my stomach, dipped my napkin into the juice, and slipped it into my purse. Evidence that night, lying awake, Robert's warnings haunted me. Could Samuel have been wrong? Or had my own son truly chosen money over blood? I didn't call the police, not yet, because some truths reveal themselves only when you wait. And so, my story begins with a glass I never drank, a napkin heavy with secrets, and a silence sharp enough to cut. If you were in my place, would you have confronted Matthew immediately? Or would you have waited just as I did for the truth to reveal itself? Because trust me, the truth always does. I woke the next morning with the taste of betrayal still lingering in my mouth, though the glass had never touched my lips. The napkin lay sealed in a small plastic bag on my nightstand. I hadn't slept. My body was heavy, but my mind was sharper than it had been in years. For the first time since Robert's death, I felt a different kind of clarity. A storm was coming, and I needed to be ready. Matthew called me that morning. His voice was sweet, rehearsed, like the little boy who used to beg for cookies before dinner. "Mom, how are you feeling? Did you sleep well? I hope the restaurant wasn't too much for you last night." I pressed the phone tighter against my ear, forcing warmth into my tone. "Oh, I'm fine, darling. Just a little tired. You know how it is at my age." There was a pause, long enough for me to hear the quiet shuffle of papers on his end. He wasn't calling because he cared. He was checking whether I was still alive. Good, he replied quickly. "Listen, Lauren and I were thinking we should come by later this week. We want to go over some financial paperwork, just to help you stay organized, you know?" Financial paperwork. Those words struck me like icy water. Robert had always kept meticulous files. Our assets, our trusts, everything documented down to the last receipt. Why now? Why such urgency? I agreed to the visit, but inside I could already sense the tightening noose. When Matthew and Lauren arrived 2 days later, their presence filled my home with a chill that no fire could thaw. Lauren's perfume arrived before she did, a strong, cloying scent that claimed the space like territory. She smiled at me, all teeth and no warmth. "Oh, Jackie, you really should consider downsizing," she said, glancing at the framed paintings of Robert along the hallway. "This house is so much for someone your age." Her words cut deeper than she knew. This wasn't just a house. It was where Robert and I had spent 40 years of love and labor. Every wall breathed with memories. But to Lauren, it was square footage waiting to be liquidated. At the dining table, Matthew spread out documents, his pen tapping nervously. "Mom, these are just some forms. Healthcare authorizations, financial directives. With Dad gone, it's really important we have everything lined up. You wouldn't want the courts getting involved if anything unexpected happened." Unexpected. The word hung in the air like smoke. I took the papers, flipping through them slowly. The signatures looked neat, but not mine, as if someone had practiced imitating me. I felt my stomach tighten, but I kept my face calm. "I'll need time to review these," I said. "Robert always told me never to sign anything in a rush." Lauren rolled her eyes, sipping from her wine glass, though it was barely noon. "Jackie, you worry too much. You're not exactly a lawyer. That's why we're here, to make sure nothing falls through the cracks." Her patronizing tone was like sandpaper against my skin. I clenched my hands beneath the tablecloth, nails digging into my palms. Over the next week, their visits became more frequent. Each time they brought new excuses, helping with groceries, checking on my health, suggesting I let them manage some of Robert's accounts. At night, I'd hear the creak of floorboards outside my study. Once I caught Matthew tugging at the locked cabinet where Robert had stored his will and legal documents. He laughed it off, saying he thought it was where I kept old photo albums, but his eyes told another story. And Lauren, oh, Lauren. She wasn't even subtle. She'd walk through the house snapping pictures on her phone, the silverware, the art, even the antique desk Robert's father had given us. When I asked why, she smiled. "Oh, just cataloging, Jackie. You know, in case we need insurance claims. These things are so old, after all." But I knew better. She was inventorying what she thought would soon be hers. One afternoon, I overheard a conversation that shattered any remaining illusion of love. I had stepped onto the porch, moving quietly as I watered Robert's roses. Matthew's voice carried through the open window. "She's stubborn, Lauren, but we can't wait much longer. The debts, they're circling." Lauren's reply was colder than ice. "Then push harder. She's old, Matt. One heart attack and it's over. Nobody would question it." My hand trembled so violently that water spilled across the soil. I gripped the hose until my knuckles burned, forcing myself to breathe. There it was, proof. Not just suspicion, not just Samuel's whisper, but words straight from their mouths. I wanted to storm inside, to scream. "How dare you? I carried you in my womb. I fed you when Robert and I had nothing, but I didn't. Because I was no longer the naive woman who thought love could shield me. I was a widow armed with silence and a napkin in a plastic bag." At night, the house felt larger than ever. I'd sit in Robert's old chair staring at the empty fireplace. I thought of how many times I had defended Matthew as a boy, against teachers, neighbors, even Robert's doubts. Had I created this? Had my endless forgiveness become the soil where his greed grew? I spoke aloud to the empty room. "Robert, I should have listened. You saw it in him. You knew." Tears came hot and relentless, but they weren't the tears of a weak woman. They were the tears of someone standing at the edge of a battlefield, mourning what was lost but preparing for war. The next morning, I received a call from Dr. Ellis, an old family friend and the physician who had once treated Robert during his illness. "Jackie," he said gently, "I've run the tests on that cloth. You brought me." My heart thundered. The compound was metoprolol tartrate, in a dose 25 times higher than any prescription. If you had drunk that glass, it would have looked exactly like cardiac arrest. I closed my eyes, gripping the receiver. My hands were cold, but my resolve was burning. Now I had proof. Proof that my son wanted me gone. Proof that the woman he married would rather see me in the ground than standing in their way. And I knew then, I would not confront them in anger. No, I would wait. I would gather. I would let them believe they had me cornered. And when the time came, I would make sure the truth struck harder than any poison could. If you were in my place, would you go to the police right away? Or would you wait, watch, and let the snakes coil tighter around themselves until they had no escape? Because that's exactly what I chose to do. The test results from Dr. Ellis burned in my hand like fire. Proof. Cold, clinical proof. My son had tried to kill me. I sat in silence for a long time, the afternoon light spilling through Robert's study window, glinting off the frames of his paintings. My husband's eyes, frozen forever in photographs, seemed to ask me the question I had been avoiding. What will you do now, Jackie? I wanted to scream. I wanted to rush to the police with the napkin and the lab report, to let justice crash down on Matthew and Lauren like thunder. But then I remembered the little boy who once scraped his knees running across this very yard, who came to me crying with muddy hands, and how I kissed him and told him everything would be all right. How could that boy have turned into this man? My heart cracked in two directions. One half still clung to him as my son. The other half, stronger now, saw him for what he had become, a man drowning in debt, clawing at my life to save his own. I realized then I couldn't let sentimentality guide me anymore. Sentiment had blinded me for years. No. If I wanted to survive, if I wanted Robert's legacy to endure, I needed strategy. That night, I called Victoria Price. To outsiders, she was my lawyer, but to me, she was more like a daughter. Robert had mentored her during law school, and she had stayed by our side through his illness. When she arrived, her eyes softened as she embraced me. "Jackie, you sounded shaken. What's happened?" I laid everything out. The napkin, the whispers, the false documents Matthew had pushed in front of me. At first, she sat in silence, her knuckles whitening around her coffee mug. Finally, she spoke. "We'll need to move carefully. If what you're saying is true, this isn't just greed. It's attempted murder. But if we go to the authorities too soon, they'll wriggle out of it. We need them to trap themselves." Her words steadied me. For the first time, I wasn't alone in carrying this secret. Over the following days, I began to play a role. When Matthew called, I made my voice sound weaker. "Oh, Matt, I've been feeling so tired lately. Maybe you're right. Maybe I do need help sorting things out." Lauren visited with false concern, placing her hand on mine at the table. "We just want what's best for you, Jackie. You shouldn't have to worry about these complicated things anymore." I nodded, feigning gratitude. But inside, I was watching, always watching, every glance, every whisper, every slip of the tongue, and slowly, they grew bolder. Victoria pulled their financial records, and what she found chilled me. $2 million in debt, credit cards maxed, loans from dangerous lenders, a mortgage they could no longer pay. "They're cornered," Victoria said grimly. "That's why they're desperate. If you die naturally, they inherit everything, and the debts disappear. But if you live, Jackie, they lose everything." I sat back, the reality hitting me like a storm. So to them, my life is just a ledger entry, a subtraction they're trying to erase. Victoria placed her hand over mine. "But we're not going to let them." We devised a plan. I would act frailer, more distracted. I would leave documents, fake ones prepared by Victoria, lying about, suggesting I was preparing to hand over assets. Meanwhile, Victoria would quietly gather every shred of evidence. One evening, when Matthew and Lauren came by, I left the study door slightly ajar. Inside, a folder marked Healthcare Proxy sat prominently on the desk. From the kitchen, I watched their silhouettes lean over the papers. Lauren's voice, low but urgent. "She hasn't signed these yet. Push her tomorrow. Tell her the doctors need it." Matthew's reply, "Relax. Once she's gone, no one will question it." I tightened my grip on the counter's edge, forcing my breath steady. Every word was a dagger, but each dagger was also proof. Meanwhile, Dr. Ellis grew more concerned. "Jackie, you can't stay alone with them knowing this. One slip, one moment, and it could be over." I shook my head. "If I hide, they win. I need to see this through." He studied me, then nodded slowly. "Then let me at least be on call. Whatever you do, don't eat or drink anything they give you." I smiled faintly. "Don't worry. That lesson I've already learned." At night, I sat by Robert's favorite painting, a stormy seascape he had finished just before he fell ill. The waves crashed against the rocks in violent strokes, but above them, a small boat clung to the horizon. "That's me now, Robert," I whispered. "The waves are trying to swallow me, but I won't sink. Not yet." I thought of women like me, mothers, widows, caretakers, who had given everything only to be discarded. I thought of how many had been silenced, how many had been erased by those they loved most. Not me. Not this time. One afternoon, I returned from the garden to find Matthew in my study. He didn't hear me at first, too absorbed in the papers spread before him. But when I cleared my throat, he jumped, knocking over a stack of files. His smile came quickly, too quickly. "Oh, hey, Mom. Just organizing things for you. You know, making sure you don't lose track." My gaze fell to the floor. Among the scattered papers lay something that wasn't mine, a draft document with my forged signature, transferring authority of my healthcare decisions to Matthew. I bent slowly, picking it up. Our eyes locked. His face was pale, his jaw clenched. In that silent moment, we both knew the game was no longer hidden. The question was, who would make the first move? If you were standing there with your child's forgery in your hand, would you confront him then and there? Or would you tuck it away, let him think you hadn't noticed, and bide your time? Because I slipped the paper into the stack, smiled faintly, and said, "Thank you, Matthew. You've always been so thorough." But inside, I was already sharpening my next move. The day of reckoning arrived not with thunder, but with the quiet rustle of papers. Matthew and Lauren had arranged a family meeting at the law office where Robert's estate documents were stored. They said it was to finalize details, to make things easier for me. But I knew better. This wasn't for me. This was their stage, where they believed the curtain would fall on my story. What they didn't know was that Victoria and I had rewritten the script. The conference room was polished oak and cold steel. Matthew sat confidently at one end of the table, Lauren at his side, their hands clasped like co-conspirators awaiting triumph. Papers were stacked neatly before them, pens aligned as if signatures were inevitable. I entered slowly, leaning a bit on my cane for effect. My heart thundered in my chest, but my face betrayed nothing. Behind me, Victoria carried a leather portfolio, sleek, unassuming. But inside it lay the weapons sharper than any blade, documents, recordings, and truth. Lauren's smile was too wide. "Jackie, you look tired. Don't worry, this won't take long." Matthew gestured to the chair. "Mom, sit. We've made this as simple as possible. Just a few signatures and everything will be in order." I lowered myself into the chair, folding my hands, and gave a small nod. "Of course. Let's begin." Matthew slid the first document toward me. This is the healthcare directive, standard stuff. Just sign here and Lauren and I can take care of any emergencies on your behalf. I traced the page with my finger, my eyes resting on the forged signature at the bottom. Curious. This looks familiar. Lauren shifted. It's just the template, nothing to worry about. I lifted my gaze, steady and sharp. Funny. Because Dr. Ellis confirmed that this exact signature isn't mine. In fact, it's forged. The room froze. Victoria reached into her portfolio, laying down the lab report like a dealer placing a winning hand. Forensic handwriting analysis, she said calmly. Conclusive evidence of forgery. Matthew's jaw tightened. This is absurd. But Victoria wasn't done. Another paper slid forward. And here, search history tied to your devices. How to fake a heart attack. Metoprolol tartrate lethal dosage. Recognize these? Lauren's face drained of color. I leaned in, my voice low but resonant. Do you remember that night at the restaurant, Matthew, when you poured something into my glass? His eyes darted, panic flickering beneath the bravado. I reached into my bag and laid down the sealed evidence. The napkin, stained faintly orange. Victoria followed with Dr. Ellis's toxicology report. Metoprolol tartrate, I said softly, in a dose 25 times greater than therapeutic, designed to mimic cardiac arrest. If not for Samuel Harris's warning, I would have swallowed your betrayal whole. The silence was suffocating. Lauren's hands trembled. Matthew tried to mask his fear with anger. This is a setup. You can't prove intent. Victoria's lips curved into the faintest smile. Intent? Perhaps. But combined with your debts, your forged documents, your search history, let's just say any prosecutor would call it attempted murder. Lauren broke first. We didn't mean for it to go this far, she cried, her voice cracking. We were drowning in debt. The house, the loans, those collectors. Her desperation only fueled my resolve. And so you decided my life was worth less than your luxuries? You desecrated Robert's memory by trying to steal what he built with his hands. You would have sold his paintings, lied to the world, and buried me with a smile on your faces. Tears welled, but they were no longer tears of sorrow. They were tears of righteous fury. Matthew slammed his fist on the table. You don't understand. Without that money, we're ruined. I rose slowly, gripping the table edge, letting my voice cut through him like glass. Better ruined than damned. Victoria pulled out one last document. Before we proceed, you should know, Jackie has already transferred Robert's entire estate. Every dollar, every painting, every property is now secured under the Robert Dawson Foundation. Matthew blinked. What? That's... Lauren's voice rose shrill. That money is ours. No, I said, my tone steel. It was never yours. It belongs to the legacy Robert dreamed of, to the children who will study art because of him, to the families who will eat because of him, not to gamblers and liars who thought blood was a ticket to wealth. Victoria laid the foundation charter before them, legally binding, irrevocable, effective immediately. Their faces collapsed, the color drained, the future they had plotted, every selfish dream crumbled into dust before their eyes. I turned toward them, my voice steady, cold, yet laced with a final shard of mercy. Here are your choices. You walk away with nothing but the clothes on your backs, or you face prison for forgery, fraud, and attempted murder. The police already have copies of this evidence. Which fate do you prefer? Lauren sobbed openly, collapsing into her chair. Matthew's bravado cracked, his lips trembling as he tried to form words but found none. I leaned closer, my eyes locking onto his. This villa, this fortune, this name, they are mine. And you, Matthew, you are nothing but a trespasser in your father's house. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Only the faint ticking of the clock filled the room. Then Victoria gathered the documents with precision, each page a nail in the coffin of their schemes. I straightened my back, my cane tapping firmly against the hardwood as I moved toward the door. This meeting is over. Behind me, I heard Lauren's quiet sobs, Matthew's muffled curse, and the heavy silence of defeat. As I stepped into the sunlight outside the law office, the weight lifted from my chest, yet my heart still ached. I had won. I had survived, but I had also lost something irretrievable, the son I once believed in. Would the law claim him next, or would my ultimatum be enough to make him disappear forever? The choice was his, and the consequences, well, those belonged to fate. If you were me, would you have pressed charges or let them walk away with nothing but shame? Tell me, because even now I wonder whether mercy was strength or weakness. The sun felt different on my face that afternoon, warmer, lighter, as though it knew I had finally laid down a burden I had carried for years. Inside the law office, my son's world had collapsed. Out here, in the open air, I felt something I hadn't in a long time: freedom. When I returned home, the house was silent. For years, silence had felt like loneliness, a void left after Robert's passing. But that evening, silence was peace. I walked slowly through the rooms. My cane tapped softly against the hardwood floors, echoing through the halls lined with Robert's paintings. His seascapes, his portraits, his abstracts. They had always spoken to me. But tonight, they felt alive. For the first time in months, I no longer feared these walls. They weren't waiting to witness my end. They were protecting me, sheltering me, as I began a new chapter. On the mantel above the fireplace sat a photo of Robert holding Matthew as a boy. I touched the frame gently, whispering, "I'm sorry. I couldn't save him from himself, but I saved us. I saved you." In the following weeks, the Robert Dawson Foundation became more than ink on paper. It became real. Victoria and I worked tirelessly, setting up scholarships for young artists, funding community programs, and planning an exhibition to honor Robert's life's work. At the launch event, I stood surrounded by canvases, their colors bold and defiant against the white gallery walls. Children held their parents' hands, pointing at the paintings with wonder in their eyes. Critics praised Robert's vision. Students whispered dreams of becoming artists themselves. In that moment, I knew I had done the right thing. Robert's legacy would outlive betrayal. His art would belong not to greed, but to hope. I didn't see Matthew and Lauren for months, not until one gray morning when I found an envelope at my door. Inside was a short note in Matthew's handwriting: "We're leaving town. You'll never hear from us again. I wish I could say I'm sorry, but I'm not sure I know what that means anymore." No apology, no recognition of the pain they had caused, just an echo of the boy I once knew, now hollowed by choices I could never undo. I sat with the letter for a long time, letting the tears come. Not for myself, not for the estate, not even for Robert, but for the son who had traded his soul for money. I burned the letter in the fireplace. Some ashes are better scattered than kept. A month later, I traveled to the coast where Robert and I had once spent summers. The waves crashed against the rocks, wild and untamed, just as he had painted them. I walked along the shore, the wind tangling my hair, the salt stinging my eyes. And yet I smiled. For so long I had been the victim of grief, of betrayal, of silence. But now I was the survivor. More than that, I was the keeper of truth. I realized something then. Strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it waits, watching, gathering, until the time comes to strike not with violence, but with justice. If you're listening to my story, Maybe you've lived through something similar. Maybe you've given everything to your family, your love, your years, your sacrifices, only to be cast aside when they thought you were no longer useful. If so, hear me clearly. You are not alone. Respect is not a gift owed by blood. It is earned by love, by kindness, by truth. And if those around you cannot see that, it does not mean you are worthless. It means they are blind. Do not let their blindness define you. Do not let betrayal silence you. Stand even if your knees shake. Speak even if your voice trembles, because justice has a way of finding those who wait with patience and courage. I never drank that poisoned glass, but in a way, I did taste it. The bitterness forced me to see what I had ignored for years. And maybe that's the lesson here. Sometimes betrayal is the bitter medicine that wakes us from denial. It hurts, yes, it breaks, but it also cleanses. It forces us to draw boundaries, to protect what matters, to honor the love that deserves to endure. Robert's art will hang on walls for decades to come. My story will be remembered not as the tragedy of a poisoned widow, but as the victory of a woman who refused to be erased. So I ask you, if you were in my place, what would you have done? Would you have pressed charges, dragged your own son through the courts? Or would you have done as I did, cutting him off with nothing but the weight of his own shame? Share your thoughts in the comments. Share your own stories of betrayal, of resilience, of moments when you found strength in silence. Because here, in this community, no one suffers alone. And if my story touched you, don't forget to subscribe to Twist Stories. There are countless voices waiting to be heard, stories of sacrifice, betrayal, and the tables that turn when truth rises. Remember this, blood does not guarantee love. Love is proven in actions, in respect, in kindness. And when betrayal comes, as bitter as it may be, let it not poison you. Let it forge you. As the sun set over the waves, I whispered Robert's name into the wind. The sea carried it back to me, soft and endless. I turned away from the shore, my cane steady, my steps firm. The past was behind me, the future ahead. And for the first time in a long time, I walked not as a victim, not as a widow, not as a mother betrayed, but as Jacqueline Dawson, whole, unbroken, and free.